Okay, so another session, and today I'm gonna be creating height maps. So it's kind of more for gamers. I haven't played games in a little while, so the machines just play the music and the DVDs and stuff like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and see how we can create some of this stuff, and let's do this. Not for games really, but just for fun. So, cheer. Let's do this. Okay, so first things first, I'm actually going to make my mesh 150 in resolution, and first thing I'm gonna drop, we're gonna kind of implement this in a few ways. So I'm gonna drop in a COP2 network, which is the compositing network in Houdini. Name it something like that. And what we're gonna go ahead and do is dive into COPs by switching into the composite view. By just I have some few tabs on the top, so all I did was just double click on that. Now I need to go back to OBJ mode and dive inside this. Now we're gonna drop in our first cop node, which will be a color. Could be any color, and for one, I'm actually making a square map, so that way, uh, so 1024 by 1024. Because I believe in games they always use square maps or something like that. 512 by 512, 1024 by 1024, 2048 by 2048, 4096, and all the squares going up. And pretty much we're gonna create a height map based out of this. So, and for one, the grid is also square. Then next we're gonna go and drop is a VARP2 generator. Alright, so we got a VARP2 generator, and we're gonna dive inside, and it has this humongous list of stuff which it has, and it's really long. But what we need is actually down here, the X and the Y. These are all the two guys that we need. So for one, we're actually gonna drop in a float to vector. And yes, we're gonna be dealing with some vectors over here also. So float to vectors. And also it's a 2D vector, so it's not a 3D vector since we are dealing in a 2D space. And now we got that, we can actually drop in pretty much anything that you want. So we can drop in now. As far as the all of this stuff goes, you're gonna have to play with some of this stuff. We see what you like, see what you don't like. So we can drop in a veins, for example, and it's gonna calculate this stuff, and now it's gonna ask for position data and all this kind of other good stuff. So I just plugged it in over here, and honestly I'm not even gonna look at the parameters and nothing like that. We're just gonna be trying to see how it actually works. So you're gonna kind of have to play with the parameters, see how they do, and just play around with this. Then if you want to make it more fancy, you can also go back to the patterns and add a anti-alias noise, turbulent, voronoi, whichever one you feel like. Then I'll just plug that in over here, and now you can just output the result back over here, which is actually an RGBA format, which you just need the RGBA. So for one, I'm gonna get a vector to float. I mean, float to vector. Oh, actually the right way. Vector to float, and I'm gonna plug in the first value to the R and corresponding to each one. And now this is gonna be a black and white image, of which actually that's what we want. Really, we don't want no colors. And then for you can plug this in directly, but we're actually gonna go ahead and add these two boys up. So we're gonna add the vein data to the anti-alias noise, and now you're just gonna plug that result out. Now if you go back outside and click and see how this looks like, you got all this kind of good stuff. So pretty much the black, you'd have no ridges, you'd have pretty much flat land, and the gray would actually be the mountain going up. And and as I said earlier, you wanna come and play with some of the settings. So like you can see what that does in the for the anti-alias noise and the amplitude and all that kind of good stuff. So depending on how bad you want your stuff, you might want to play with some of this stuff, so you can offset it and all that kind of good stuff. But we're just gonna leave it at that. So assuming this is the kind of height map that we're looking for, even though you don't think you want the edges over here because it's gonna kind of raise it up, but we're just gonna leave it as is. You'll have to play with the settings, also the veins settings. You're gonna have to play with this. So for vein frequency, increase that. I would say that was good. So we just leave it at that. So last thing we're gonna drop is a utility null, which is we're gonna rename to something which should be kinda good. So export height map sounds good. And for one, then let's just assume we're pretty much done with this. So we're gonna go back up, and now we're actually gonna implement all this data on the grid. So for one, we're gonna go ahead and drop in a texture because we need UV data for the grid. So we're gonna go under material, drop in a UV texture, and the data is gonna be coming in from the y-axis since the grid is actually lying flat on the plane over here. So it should be good. Should be good. I mean, it's still lying flat, and everything else should be good as default. Now we're gonna implement, I would say, 2 styles, 3 styles. I don't know. Let's see which one is easy. We can use a points up to get the data out. Plug in a points up, and for the y value, you wanna get the luminance value from the value output from the cop from the what you call it from the cop2 network which you just made. So we're gonna go ahead type in the expression over here. So I'm gonna go ahead use a text function to get the value out, and as you can see, as text function asks for a string file name, a float u, a float v, and a string color type. So in our case, string file name, which is not actually on disk, because actually what it means by file name is something that's already inside the hard disk. So we don't have nothing like that. So for one, we're gonna just input the string name as a first. We'll put the two little quote things, and then we're gonna put the op function. The op function is actually what's gonna simulate like a hard drive. Then you're gonna put your colon to simulate the hard drive, then slash. As you can see now, Houdini says, oh yeah, I know exactly what you want. So obj slash create height map slash, and